Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and join our family. Now stay with us. The story begins. Morning poured through the tall window like pale honey. Charlotte bent over her drafting table, adding the final stroke to a perfect living room. A stone fireplace, a sand-colored hand-woven rug, light falling exactly where the love seat would be. Then she erased one of the cups. Most homes had two, but her apartment only needed one. She turned off the desk lamp, tied up her hair, and slipped on her running shoes. Her daily schedule looked neat from afar, yet whenever she touched it, it still felt cold. The gym on the ground floor opened with the scent of clean detergent and the hum of treadmills rolling. Charlotte set her water bottle on the holder and pressed the start button. The numbers climbed rhythmically. Morning light swept across the machines like a soothing hand. Inhale 4 counts, exhale 4 counts. She didn't run to get stronger. She ran to quiet her thoughts. In the corner, a man was lifting weights. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair. He didn't count aloud or flaunt his strength. Each movement felt like a quiet signature in the air, marked by patience. Charlotte stared straight into the mirror and reminded herself, focus. 15 minutes passed. Sweat fell in neat drops along her wrist. She reached for her bottle. The cap wasn't tight. Water spilled over her fingers, then clink. The bottle rolled off the tray, spun weakly across the floor, and stopped right in front of a pair of gray running shoes. The man bent down slowly to pick it up. "I think this belongs to you," he said in a low, calm voice. Morning light lingered in his eyes, dark and deep like an early autumn lake. "Thank you. I always forget to tighten the cap," Charlotte stammered. "No worries. Maybe the water just wanted to take a walk." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. He set the bottle back on her tray, twisting it once to steady it. "Charlotte," she said, drawing a simple line of introduction between them. "Tommy," he replied. "Glad I caught your runaway bottle in time." They both laughed, a small sound that made the morning feel more real. Charlotte picked up her pace again. Tommy returned to his weights. Through the mirror, she occasionally caught his reflection. Quiet, composed. There was a loud kind of strength, and a silent kind. He was the latter. At the 30-minute mark, she slowed down, stepped off, and wiped her forehead. Tommy was stretching on a mat. She hesitated for half a beat, then walked over. "Do you always come at this hour?" "Usually," he said, keeping his back straight, "unless I'm on a night shift. Running helps me switch off a few leftover sounds." Leftover sounds. The heart monitor beeps, the door pushes open, the hurried footsteps. He looked up. "I work at a hospital." She nodded. It fit his calmness perfectly. "I fix rooms so people can feel less lost." Interior design. "And do you do that for yourself too?" His tone was soft but direct. The question landed gently like dust. Charlotte looked down at her shoes and gave a faint smile. "I'm managing." "Managing sounds like a beautiful chair that's cold when you sit on it," he said. "Maybe it just needs the right light." "You must read a lot of lighting catalogs," she teased. "No, I just noticed that morning light makes people look steadier," he said, glancing toward the machines. "And water, when it falls, always finds the lowest spot. People, though, look for the warmest one. And where's the warmest spot?" "Where you don't have to explain too much." He shrugged lightly, as if the answer were too personal. A comfortable silence settled between them. The smell of clean cotton, the steady hum of treadmills, like background music someone had pre-mixed. Charlotte checked the wall clock. "I should head up to the office. I've got a drawing that needs to feel less cold today." "Good luck, Charlotte." He picked up his own bottle. "And remember to tighten the cap." "I will, Doctor," she said absent-mindedly, then froze. "Sorry, I guessed." "Good guess," he said with a quiet smile. "But I won't say more. At least not in the gym." They nodded, a neat farewell ritual. She walked down the hallway filled with thin light, feeling as if she were passing through a pane of warm glass. In the elevator, the steel mirror reflected her tied-up hair and eyes that still held a tiny sparkle. Small, but enough to make her heart feel less empty. The office opened with the scent of freshly cut wood. Charlotte adjusted her desk lamp so the golden light fell on the spot where clients usually sat and exhaled. She added a thin throw blanket on the armchair in her drawing, a detail no one had asked for, but somehow the room looked less cold. By noon, while colleagues chatted about their weekends, she absent-mindedly twisted her bottle cap tight and smiled. That night, the apartment greeted her with its familiar silence. She didn't turn on the ceiling light, only a small desk lamp, its glow gathered softly in the corner, like cautious arms. She left a slice of the night showing through the curtain. The morning drawing came back to her. This time she kept both cups. Not because someone was already there, but because she finally believed someone could be. Before going to bed, Charlotte turned the bottle cap once more, a small, crisp click in the air. A quiet reminder. Tomorrow morning will come again. The treadmill will roll, the light will fall on the floor, and maybe another bottle will stop exactly where it's meant to. After the morning when the water bottle wanted to go for a walk, their accidental encounters began to form a pattern of their own. Sometimes the elevator stalled on the 6th floor for 10 extra seconds, just long enough for them to share the same white-lit space. Sometimes the gym door opened at the exact moment Charlotte was walking in, and Tommy was pushing it from the inside. They sidestepped each other, half a beat off, then laughed together. Some mornings she finished her run right when he switched to stretching, and both pretended to stay busy a little longer, one wiping the machine more carefully than usual, the other retying already tight shoelaces. One crisp morning, when the air carried a clean chill, Charlotte saw Tommy sitting at the gym's water bar near a small coffee machine. A thin stream of steam rose from the paper cup in front of him, fading like breath after a run. She walked over, dropped a coin into the machine, and selected Americano. As the hot water poured, she spoke as if commenting on the weather, but it sounded more like an opening. "The city's quieter this morning. Maybe people needed a break," Tommy replied, watching the steam trail upward before his eyes shifted to her. "Or maybe the weather's too nice, everyone's slowing down a little." She picked up her cup and sat on the high stool beside him. "Do you usually stay here after running?" "Only if I don't have to rush to the hospital," he said, eyes lowering briefly. "I'm a resident doctor. Night shifts feel like roads without an end. I run to let my footsteps drown out some sounds." "What kind of sounds?" Charlotte asked, though she'd heard a similar answer before. Tommy smiled faintly, lifting his cup. "The beeping monitors, the wheels of stretchers, the sliding doors of the ER. Those sounds linger even after you leave the hospital." Charlotte nodded, her hands wrapped around the warm paper cup. "I carry a different kind of noise. The scratch of a pencil on paper at 2 a.m., client emails at 6, the silence of my apartment at 10 at night." She gave a quiet laugh. "I design houses, but mine doesn't have much of a personality." "Doesn't have a personality?" He tilted his head. "Perfectly proportioned, right lighting, right layout. But it still feels cold. I'm good at creating homes for others to come back to, yet I live like a tenant in my own life." Tommy fell silent for a moment, his gaze deepening like a cool well. "We all carry an unbuilt house inside us," he said slowly, placing each word like a brick. "And sometimes we're just trying to find the right blueprint." His words caught Charlotte off guard, not for their poetry, but for how precisely they fit the hollow space inside her. She looked down at her cup, noticing the surface had stopped steaming. "My blueprints always have 2 mugs," she murmured, "but in my cupboard, I only wash one." Tommy didn't ask further. The silence between them wasn't the kind that demanded speech. It was the kind that made you want to speak. "Are night shifts hard?" she asked, offering him a conversational chair. "Some nights are tough, some are peaceful." "Peaceful means no emergencies. Tough is when everything happens at once." He took a sip. "But sometimes, it's beautiful too. Like after a cardiac resuscitation, when the monitor returns to its steady rhythm. It feels like the whole world exhales together." "Exhales together?" Charlotte repeated, feeling her own lungs lighten a little. They sat side by side, unhurried. Outside the glass wall, sunlight smeared golden streaks across the dew-wet pavement. People came and went, each carrying their own rush of emotions. The two of them, by contrast, seemed to be stretching a small moment like a strand of caramel. After that, morning coffees became an unspoken routine. At first, they talked about harmless things: which running shoes hurt less, which park had fewer headwinds, which bakery ran out of baguettes too early. Then the topics wandered further. Charlotte told him about her childhood kitchen, with its scratched wooden table, soot marks, and her mother wiping it with lemon-scented cloths. Tommy spoke of his old backyard tree that shed red leaves onto the tin roof, the rain tapping like tiny drums, and of quiet dinners after a surname that weighed too much. Gradually, Charlotte allowed herself to speak more plainly. "Sometimes I feel like I build the backdrop for other people's happiness," she said, meeting his eyes. "I work with newlyweds, expecting parents. I set up cribs, hang lights, pick wall colors. Then I go home, turn on the ceiling light, and see dust on my counter." Tommy didn't offer a cliche. He set his now cold cup down on the metal counter, leaned slightly closer, voice lower. "I don't think you build backdrops. You measure light so happiness can take shape. Maybe your apartment just needs someone to turn on the light with you." Charlotte pressed her lips together, feeling a smile rise but not spill. "You have a way of making people want to go home early. Home is where your breath returns to its normal rhythm," he said softly, "usually because of the right gaze." The gaze, those two words drifted between them like a paper boat. Charlotte looked up and met his dark eyes, steady, warm, asking for nothing, probing nothing. There she saw her own reflection, a 32-year-old woman still learning to believe that a home could be built from the softest material, kindness. Tommy's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face shifting briefly, then softening. "I have to head to the hospital," he said, standing up. "Tomorrow, if you're free, I owe you a cup of coffee that doesn't go cold." Charlotte nodded, holding her own cup, cold long ago. "Tomorrow," she echoed, not asking for details about his shift. They exchanged a small nod, like the last line of a short chapter. As Charlotte stepped outside, the morning breeze brushed her face, carrying the city's faint metallic scent. The cooled coffee in her hand didn't taste bad. It held the last warmth of a conversation she wasn't ready to put down. In the window's reflection, her shadow passed, and behind it, a gaze, just enough to remind her that some mornings need nothing more than that to make her breath fall back into rhythm. The message arrived at 10:37 a.m., amid a flood of emails about wall color palettes and inspection schedules. "Tommy, are you free tonight? I'd like to take you to dinner. An actual dinner. Not coffee on the run, not a gym water break. A full sentence invitation, period included." Charlotte stood before her closet longer than usual. The navy dress hung quietly in the corner. Minimalist cut, modest V-neck, the fabric draping over her body's calm curves. She hadn't had many chances to wear it. As she pulled up the zipper, she caught her reflection. Not dazzling, but bright. A touch of lipstick, a sweep of mascara, then a pause before the vanity. The place that always felt like something invisible was missing. "All right," she whispered to herself, granting her heart permission to flutter. The restaurant sat on a cobblestone corner, tall glass windows glowing honey gold. The host led her past velvet chairs to a small table by the window. Tommy was already there. White shirt, charcoal blazer, cuffs neatly rolled. He stood, and the smile that spread across his face was one that couldn't hide relief. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Navy, like the city night before a storm." Charlotte blushed. "And you look like someone who could talk to the waiter in Italian." "I only know one phrase," Tommy grinned. "Grazie." They ordered a bottle of red. As the waiter tilted the bottle, the wine slid down the glass like a warm ink line. Their glasses met with a soft ting, a sound as clear as a small confirmation that tonight was worth remembering. "How was your day?" Tommy asked. "Ordinary," Charlotte said, swirling her glass, the reflected light shimmering in her eyes. "I argued with a ceiling lamp. It wanted to shine straight down on the table. I wanted it to fall slightly off-center." "And who won?" "I did," she laughed, "because dinner always tastes better when the light casts a warm shadow on the face across from you." Tommy looked at her, as though her story about a ceiling lamp spoke a language he already understood. "When you talk about homes," he said slowly, "your eyes are brighter than every light in the city." It wasn't a casual flirtation. It was measured with the precision of someone paying attention. Charlotte felt warmth rise in her chest. Her heartbeat was steady, yet she was aware of happiness. "Maybe because home is what I understand best," she said softly, "and what I miss most." Courses arrived one by one, a fig salad, pan-seared fish with a brown butter aroma, and a plate of hand-rolled pasta infused with cardamom. They spoke between bites about an old patient who kept stray cats, a client insisting on hanging a mirror opposite the door, the creaky stairs that aged a few months every time it rained. There was no awkward silence. Their pauses felt like the ink resting before it spread. Not a lack of words, but room for them to settle. Their fingers brushed when both reached to push the breadbasket forward. Charlotte pulled back a second too soon, then laughed at herself. Tommy chuckled too, his gaze dropping briefly to her hand before returning, never overstaying the fragile moment. They clinked glasses again, this time for no reason at all. "Do you come here often?" Charlotte asked. "Rarely. Night shifts tend to eat dinner before I can," he said, twirling his glass, watching the wine rise. "But tonight I wanted a place without beeping monitors." She smiled, and with the sound of glasses touching. "And someone talking about ceiling lamps." They both laughed. At the next table, a couple debated kitchen paint colors. In the corner, a pianist toyed with a new melody. Charlotte suddenly realized this was the first time she felt seen, not looked at, not because of the dress or eyeliner, but because her words were being kept as if they mattered. When dessert arrived, a chocolate cake laced with delicate swirls like fingerprints. Tommy glanced at his phone. Just once, but Charlotte caught the subtle shift in his expression. A brief tension, then smooth composure, like a pond rippling from a pebble's drop. He flipped the phone face down and smiled. "Sorry, I'm trying not to let it ruin the chocolate." "It's okay," she said, though a fine chill traced the back of her neck. She remembered I work at a hospital, the all-access card for every sudden call. Still, instinct stirred, the same one that came with blueprints labeled subject to change. They drifted into talk of an imagined trip, a small suburban town with flowered fences, a kitchen washed in slanted morning sun. Charlotte joked that she'd design the place for free if he cooked. Tommy said he only knew soft-boiled eggs and chicken soup, but would learn more if someone was willing to taste the failures. "I can eat failure," she said, "as long as the kitchen light is right." "I'll handle the lighting," he replied, "by saving you a warm spot." When the waiter refilled their glasses, Tommy's fingers brushed the rim of hers. This time, Charlotte didn't pull back. They looked at each other through the dark red surface, eyes touching first, then the smile, small and careful, as if not to spill whatever fullness they had found. Outside, night glazed the city rooftops in deep blue. Charlotte felt her chest lighten in a way she couldn't explain, like a closed room had just been cracked open. Yet beneath that calm surface, a faint unease lingered, a thin thread of uncertainty born from that quick glance at his phone, the fleeting strain on his brow, and the way he always sidestepped talk of family whenever it came up. The phone vibrated just as the waiter set a silver spoon beside the dessert. A brief, polite sound, but in that warm golden room, it rang clear as a pin drop. Tommy glanced at the screen, only for a split second, then looked up, his smile dimming by half. "I'm sorry, it's the hospital." "I'll just step out for a minute," he said softly, his hand brushing the edge of the table as if to reassure her before he stood. The glass door closed behind him, leaving 2 glasses of red wine and a slice of chocolate cake with an unfinished knife mark. Charlotte watched the candle flame tremble in the air conditioning draft, steadying the offbeat rhythm of her heart. 1 minute, she told herself. 5 minutes. The spoon still lay perfectly aligned. Wine bubbles slid lazily down the glass. 10 minutes. The pianist in the corner switched to a slower ballad. A line of wax melted down the candle. 15 minutes. The waiter avoided meeting her eyes each time he passed. 20 minutes. The silence began to feel as heavy as a freshly laundered tablecloth still damp from the wash. Charlotte picked up her phone. No messages. She called. The line rang once, then went straight to voicemail. She set it down, unconsciously straightening the base of her glass to align with the wood grain. In the tilted mirror by the marble pillar, she saw herself, navy blue dress, simple V-neck, hair tied low. A woman who, not long ago, had been seen with her whole soul and now sat alone. The waiter approached softly. "Would you like some more water, ma'am?" Thank you. I'll wait a little longer. Charlotte smiled, the kind of smile polite enough to let others retreat. At the 25th minute, the manager appeared. He appeared to be in his 40s, wearing a dark tie and eyes trained in the subtlety of service. He stopped half a step from the table, bowing slightly. My apologies, miss. Is there any issue with your companion? He stepped out to take a call and hasn't come back. Charlotte kept her tone even. It might be an emergency case. The manager's eyes flicked briefly toward the door Tommy had left through. He hesitated as if weighing whether a question should be asked. Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only the two of them could hear. Do you know who he is, miss? The question fell like the invisible lid of a wine glass. Charlotte blinked. He's a doctor. The manager studied her for a beat longer. His full name is Tommy Wilson, son of former Governor August Wilson. In Charlotte's mind, Wilson separated itself from the sentence. Standing alone, a gray landmark. She had seen that name in headlines, on evening news tickers, next to words like corruption, embezzlement, conviction. Images of press conferences, car doors slamming, cameras flashing, noise from a layer of society she had always avoided. There must be some mistake, she said, her voice as courteous as when she'd asked for water. But her stomach tightened. The manager shook his head slightly. I recognized him when you came in. He rarely appears in public. Still, I shouldn't. He stopped himself, as if regretting saying too much. I just thought, you should know. After that, everything became both clearer and blurrier. Clear because a missing piece suddenly filled the silence around his guarded talk about family. Blurred because she no longer knew where truth ended and prejudice began. Charlotte nodded faintly in thanks. The manager stepped back. She sat still, watching the candle shrink lower, feeling the light inside her chest shrink with it. Her fingers closed around the wine glass, too tightly. Crack. A fine, hair-thin fracture ran down the glass, catching the candlelight into a crooked gleam. She set it down slowly, afraid the whole thing might shatter. Outside the window, the city stayed dark blue and calm. Inside, the piano notes fell quiet between murmured conversations. Charlotte lifted her phone again, typed a short message. I'm still at the table, then deleted it. She wasn't sure what she was waiting for, a reasonable explanation, or simply the return of the gaze that had once warmed her. Perhaps both. Another 5 minutes passed. The waiter returned, offering to pack the dessert to go. Charlotte nodded. When he set down the paper box, its rustle sounded like a small coffin lid. She signed the check, her hand trembling slightly. The numbers stood clear, unforgiving. Rising, the navy dress rippled in a low wave. Charlotte suddenly saw how lonely that color was. As she passed the pillar mirror, her reflection detached from the gold-lit background, a cool mark in a honey-colored room. At the door, she turned once, just once, at the chair across from her, still warm. The door closed, the bell chimed softly. Outside, the night air carried the scent of damp stone. Charlotte walked slowly, fingers gripping her purse strap, her phone silent in the bag. With each step, the sound of her heels struck the pavement, steady, almost cruelly calm. She told herself it could really be an emergency. But behind that sentence, another refused to be quiet. Then why didn't he say so? Night wind slipped through her collar, brushing cold against her neck. Charlotte walked alone through the wet street, her heels ticking like a clock that refused to stop. She didn't look back. Behind her, the restaurant shrank into a faint blur of candlelight. 2 glasses left on the table, one of them cracked. Her phone buzzed. Tommy, I'm sorry, are you okay? Then again, something urgent came up. Please don't misunderstand. Then a third. Where are you? I came back. Just one word, please. Charlotte stared at the messages, thin, trembling lines in the dark, then slid the phone into her pocket. The pain wasn't sharp. It was a small, quiet cut that went deep, where the blood stayed warm and hidden. He didn't lie, she thought. He just hid the thing he was most ashamed of. And somehow that silence hurt more than deceit ever could. At home, she left the ceiling light off, turning on only the desk lamp. The glow pooled softly on one side of the room, leaving the rest in blue shadow. The untouched chocolate box from dinner sat on the counter. a gift that had expired overnight. She poured a glass of water, drank it, and thought, cold water never lies. The phone rang again. Tommy's name glowed on the screen. She let it ring until the sound faded into silence, its reflection flickering across the window pane like a heartbeat she no longer trusted. In the bathroom mirror, she saw herself. Navy dress, makeup faded, eyes heavy. Water murmured through the pipes as if the rain were waiting. "Who are you?" she asked the reflection, voice almost steady. The word Wilson flashed in her mind. Bright, warning, loud. Could all that tenderness, that calm warmth, vanish because of a surname? She didn't know. She only knew that she had waited alone in a room where the candles died one by one. She turned off the tap, removed her earrings, and lay down without changing clothes. The phone blinked once, then dimmed. Somewhere outside, rain began to fall, first softly, then steadily, blurring the city into a gray watercolor. Charlotte fell asleep to its rhythm, sinking into a quiet, dreamless dark. When morning came, the rain hadn't stopped. The sky looked washed out, like a page left too long in the sun. Charlotte woke late, boiled water, but forgot to light the stove. Out of habit, she turned on the radio. A calm voice read the news. Regarding funds allegedly transferred through charities during the tenure of former Governor August Wilson. The words slid across the counter like beads of cold glass. She turned the radio off but opened her phone. The headline read, "The Wilson Case, 10 years later." A black and white photo showed a man descending courthouse steps, blinded by camera flashes. Numbers, names, accusations, history repeating itself. She flipped the phone face down, sealing the noise inside like a box that shouldn't be opened. Tommy's messages waited beneath. "I'm sorry I made you wait. My father, something happened at the prison. My sister called. I had to go. I know it doesn't excuse not telling you sooner. Please, let me explain everything." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "He didn't lie," she repeated silently. "He just hid the thing he was most ashamed of." She typed IE, then deleted it. The anger inside her wasn't fire. It was rain soaking through fabric, heavy and cold. The sentences she'd once rehearsed dissolved like ink in water. What could I even say? "I'm not afraid of your name, only of being left alone in front of it." She went to the window. The glass was fogged, rain streaking down like graphite lines. In her reflection, she saw a woman in a thin robe, hair unbrushed, eyes caught between kindness and fear. Behind her, the room stayed unchanged. One chair, one cup, one life paused mid-sketch. She drew the outline of a house on the misted glass. It disappeared instantly under the rain. Things unbuilt never last. When the kettle finally whistled, she poured water into a cup. Steam rose and touched her cheek, soft as a reminder that she was still here, still breathing, still capable of care. She slipped her phone into a drawer and closed it, not locking it, just letting it rest with a small gap for air. In the hallway mirror before stepping out, she straightened her raincoat collar. "Work today," she told the reflection quietly, "for someone else's home. Mine, it can wait." Outside, the rain blurred every face, every color. People hurried by with hunched shoulders, each guarding a private ache. Charlotte walked among them, the hood of her coat pulled up, her steps steady. Somewhere a radio repeated that name, Wilson. She kept walking, the small voice inside her finally clear enough to be heard. He didn't lie. He just hid the thing he was most ashamed of. And maybe that hidden place is exactly where love hurts the most. The cafe sat on a narrow street, its striped blue and white awning sheltering what was left of last night's drizzle. The glass door was fogged with condensation, and the dark wooden tables gleamed with the polish of years. Charlotte arrived 10 minutes early and chose the table by the window. She placed her wet umbrella in the rack, hung up her coat, and then sat facing the empty chair. The air smelled of bitter coffee and a hint of burnt orange, like an overripe memory. Tommy came right on time, in a charcoal coat, raindrops still clinging to his hair. He looked around, found her eyes, and gave a small nod. When he sat down, he didn't reach for her hand as he used to. Both of his hands stayed clasped together on the table, blue veins visible beneath skin thinned by too many night shifts. The waiter brought 2 cups of Americano. The spoon tapped softly against the rim. Tink, a delicate cue for a conversation neither of them wanted to begin. Charlotte wrapped her hands around her cup, letting the heat bite into her palms until it stung. "Thank you for coming," Tommy said, his voice low, roughened by lack of sleep. About that night." "I know," Charlotte cut in. Not harsh, not gentle either. "You told me. Your father had an incident in prison. Your sister called. You left." Tommy swallowed hard. "I just wanted a chance to be myself. Not my father's name." His dark eyes met hers without flinching. "I meant to tell you, but I was afraid. Afraid your eyes would change the second you heard Wilson." "I can't trust someone who didn't think I deserved the truth," Charlotte replied, each word drawn like a thread from a needle's point. "You didn't lie. You hid. But I sat alone that night, watching the candles die, and it was someone else who told me who you really were." The spoon clinked again. Tink. From behind the counter came the grind of coffee beans breaking down to dust, then silence. In that pause, neither spoke. "I didn't want you to carry that burden," Tommy said slowly, as if each word might tear something fragile. "I worked hard to get away from that name. Lived modestly, worked till exhaustion, avoided anything that could make people say, 'Ah, Wilson.' I thought, if I could wait, at least until I knew you saw me before you saw them, I'd tell you." "Maybe," Charlotte said softly, eyes fixed on the table where a cold ring of water spread from the base of her cup. "But you didn't. And the time before you said it, swallowed that night whole." Tommy sat still, eyes reddening in the literal sense. "I'm sorry," he said out of words. "I wish there'd been another way." "There's no fixing a night that's already broken," Charlotte murmured, tapping the glass once, the sound thin as air. "I don't hate you. I just don't know where I stand in your story." Outside, the drizzle turned to mist, fine as salt across the pavement. Passers-by shook umbrellas, droplets splattering against the window like brief white ghosts. Inside, the last steam of coffee rose and faded. Charlotte's cup cooled. "You could start again," Tommy said, his voice a near whisper. "Slowly. With everything I am, my work, my night shifts, even the ugly pieces of family. I don't want you to keep guessing." "You could," Charlotte repeated as if weighing a bridge, "but I'm not sure how much courage I have left to cross it." She looked up, no anger, no apology, just honesty, sharp and kind at once. "I've lived too long in other people's rooms to know this. Walls built on doubt will crack." Tommy's lips pressed tight, his hand twitched as if to reach for something, then stopped. A small red thread glistened at the corner of his eye. He blinked it away. "I understand," he rasped. "If you need time, or if you want to end it." Charlotte drew a steady breath. "I don't want to punish you for your name, but that night you left me behind. And that feeling, it's the one I fear most." She paused, setting down the final brick. "We should stop here." A spoon clinked at the next table. Tink, tink, then silence. The cafe seemed to widen, as if someone had pulled a wall back to make room for absence. Tommy nodded. No protest, no plea. "I won't bother you again," he said. "Thank you for giving me one bright season, even if it was short." "Sleep well," Charlotte said, unsure why she chose those words. Maybe because he hadn't for a long time. They stood almost at the same moment. No hug, no touch. Just a final nod, so subtle it could be mistaken for a shrug. Tommy picked up his coat and turned away. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped out, cold air sweeping in with the smell of rain. Charlotte watched his dark coat until it dissolved into the crowd. The waiter brought the check. Charlotte signed it. Her hand was steady now. When she rose, she pushed her chair neatly back into place, like tidying a room after the guest has gone. On the table, the circle of water her cup had left remained, a round trace of time that would dry in minutes, vanish as if it had never been. That afternoon, a group message from the gym popped up. "Heard Dr. Tommy's been transferred, maybe to the suburbs." Then another. "It looks like he's taken a post at the university hospital, starting next month." Charlotte read them and set her phone down. She didn't reply. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the street dark and glossy, like a photograph just developed. Tommy slipped out of the city as quietly as he'd entered her life, through a glass door left unlocked, a soft ringing bell, and the lingering scent of bitter coffee that stayed longer than anyone expected. 2 years after the goodbye at the cafe, Charlotte's life ran in a straight line with few turns. She met Richard at a site meeting, a structural engineer in a fine striped shirt, clean shoes, and a neatly placed pencil in his breast pocket. He spoke little, but every sentence stood as solid as a pillar. He never asked questions that unsettled people. He measured, confirmed numbers, signed approvals, and reminded everyone to wear helmets. One afternoon, when the rain came suddenly, he tilted his umbrella toward her. Another time, when she forgot her drawings, he turned his car around to bring them back to her. His kindness was like a stair railing, unnoticed but necessary. She started having lunch with him at a soup shop near the office, listening to him talk about bridges he'd reinforced and load-bearing walls he'd saved from collapse. No secrets, no noisy past, no name that clanged like iron doors. They married quietly, a small ceremony. Under the yellow glow of the banquet hall lights, their wedding photo appeared faint, as if it had been printed on textured paper. Richard held her hand, dry, warm, and said simply, "I'll do my best to be kind to you." Charlotte smiled, feeling the words settle in her chest like a smooth stone. She slipped on the ring, a perfect fit, as if completing the blueprint of a home. The early months passed as evenly as an approved design. Morning coffee, dinner at night, grocery runs on weekends. Richard preferred the overhead lights to be dimmed, the yellow glow spreading thinly across the dining table. He disliked harsh, cold light. Charlotte noted it and agreed. They painted the living room walls a pale cream, hanged a landscape painting, safe and neutral. The apartment became the kind of proper home that deserved praise. Their intimacy was as mild as a low-sugar dessert. Richard always asked, "Are you okay?" Or, "Is this all right?" So careful and measured that at times Charlotte felt like an instructor, labeling each move. Afterward, they would lie still, listening to the air conditioner's soft breathing. She'd look up at the ceiling, where the yellow light scattered into fine streaks. He'd pull the blanket to his chest and wish her good night. They slept. Everything was right. One Thursday evening, while she was peeling an apple, Richard leaned on the counter, watching her through the pendant light. "Are you happy?" he asked, as casually as inquiring about the paint job. Charlotte paused. The silver knife caught her reflection, small and distant. "Probably," she said, after a beat. "Everything's fine." He nodded, like acknowledging a site safety report. She went on peeling. The sound of skin falling onto the board was soft as a sigh. The ring, once snug, loosened as she lost weight under the pressure of project deadlines. Sometimes while washing dishes, it spun around her finger, sliding toward the joint. She'd push it back into place, a habit without thought, like tucking a chair neatly under the table after a meeting. No one spoke of it. She kept working, still building homes for others, choosing soft rugs, measuring dining light angles, and showing clients where to mount their reading lamps. She'd ask newlyweds, "Would you like the kitchen to be a nightly gathering place or a weekend space for quick meals?" They'd laugh, hug, and debate over whether to use double chairs or singles. Charlotte took notes in even handwriting. In the evenings, she turned on the yellow lights earlier than usual, so the room would look warm before the warmth itself arrived. Richard worked late more often. Big projects came at once. His texts were brief. "Running late. Eat first." Charlotte learned to dine alone without feeling strange. She aligned forks and spoons, stacked bowls neatly, and wiped the table clean. Everything that could be arranged, she arranged. The rest, she set on high shelves. Another night, they watched a travel show featuring a suburban house with a wooden porch and white fence. Richard pointed at the screen. "Porches get damp easily. Needs good waterproofing." Charlotte smiled, reminding herself that someone had to think about the leaks to keep the house from rotting. Yet somewhere deep inside, she wished someone would say, "I'll sit on that porch," with sunlight and the smell of baked bread. She didn't say it aloud. For their first anniversary dinner, they chose the Old Corner restaurant. Thin yellow lights, crisp tablecloths. Richard raised his glass. Thank you for a year of peace. She clinked hers, hearing in peace the echo of a hospital ward without incidents. Not bad, not wrong, just no one said beautiful. That night when she took off her ring and set it on the ceramic tray, she noticed the faint circle left on her finger. She turned the ring. It was loose enough to fall if she moved too quickly. She didn't. She simply placed it down, listening to its thin ting against the tray. The ceiling's yellow light trembled slightly under the air vent, casting a layer of warmth too thin to keep. Before turning off the lights, Richard asked, his habitual form of care, "Do you have a site visit tomorrow?" "Yes," she said. "I'm installing kitchen lights for a newlywed couple." "Wear your helmet." "Okay." They turned off the light. The room sank into a safe darkness. In the black, Charlotte touched the bare spot where her ring usually rested. The skin felt dry, cool, empty. She pulled the blanket up and turned toward the wall. Beside her, Richard's breathing was steady, mechanical. In the thin space between them, the yellow light that had just gone out left a faint warmth fading fast, as if it had never been there at all. By their 5th year together, autumn came early. The leaves outside turned overnight, then fell like forgotten notes. When Charlotte opened the kitchen window that morning, a chill swept in, along with the faint sound of a suitcase rolling over the wooden floor. Richard stood in the bedroom doorway, one hand on the handle of a clean gray suitcase. His shirt was white, collar unbuttoned, and his tie was in his pocket. There had been no fight, no breaking point, only quiet calculation after years of measuring. "I found a place to stay," he said calmly. "Maybe we should take a break, to see what still stands when we're apart." Charlotte leaned against the counter, morning light cutting across her eyes. "If something was going to collapse," she said, "it already did." He nodded, not offended. "We followed every rule, but the structure can't hold emotional weight." His gaze swept the kitchen, their cabinets, their pendant lights, every perfect angle. "Keep the ring," he added, "or exchange it." "I won't keep mine." "Take a jacket," she said automatically. "It's windy at the site." At the door, he paused. "Are you happy?" "Maybe I'm just at peace," she said. "Happiness isn't something I know how to measure." "I get it," he smiled faintly. "Thank you for the steady years." Then he left. No slammed door, no backward glance. The sound of the suitcase wheels faded into the elevator hum. Silence filled the apartment, becoming a new kind of architecture. Charlotte stood still, listening to how big the room suddenly felt. On the table lay an unfinished sketch, a living room plan with a lamp she hadn't decided on. She stared at the lines, precise and clean, then whispered, almost amused, "I can design houses that last, but I can't hold anyone's heart together." Outside, the wind slipped through the window frame, brushed the curtain, and left. That afternoon, she visited a construction site. She gave clear instructions about the ceiling beams, her tone even, gestures exact. No one there knew she'd just ended a marriage. Passing an unfinished wall, she placed her palm on the damp plaster. Cool, rough, alive. For a second, she thought about how solid silence could be. That night, she tidied the apartment, out of habit, not grief. 2 toothbrushes became one. His shirts went neatly into a box. A thin gray blanket caught the light as she shook it clean. She lay in bed, the window cracked open, wind humming like a half-finished thought. Her heartbeat was steady, neither aching nor relieved. The emptiness felt like a swept room, sad but clean. The next morning she made coffee, answered client emails, and accepted 2 new projects, a baby's nursery and a botanist's country home. Work filled the space that love had left. At noon, she stopped by the art supply shop. "You haven't bought navy in a while," the owner said. "Today I want the color of the wind," Charlotte replied. Back home, she unrolled new ivory paper across the table. No clients, no measurements. She sketched a porch, a window, a wooden table with 2 cups, then erased the people she'd drawn inside. Beneath it, she wrote, "My house, TBD." The wind brushed the paper's edge, leaving a thin coffee mark like a border on a map. She placed a gentle finger on it, steadying the page. At dusk, her mother called on video. "Did you eat?" Helena asked, framed by her lemon-scented kitchen. "I will, Mom." I'll visit this weekend. Don't let the wind sneak in, her mother said, like she'd always known there was a draft somewhere Charlotte couldn't seal. That night, Charlotte dimmed the lights and looked around. The ring still sat in its dish. She slipped it on, too loose, then took it off again. No ache, only acknowledgement. She opened her notebook, writing, reply to client B. Buy linen samples. Visit mom. Take a walk. Learn not to panic at an empty chair. Wind whispered through the window crack, the curtain lifting with each breath. She stood closing it halfway, leaving just enough space for air to pass. Her phone buzzed. An email confirming a kitchen installation for Saturday 9 a.m. She replied, okay, attached a lighting diagram, stretched and exhaled. Then the phone buzzed again. A call. Mrs. Mary, her mother's elderly neighbor. Unusual. Hello, this is Charlotte. Charlotte, dear? The voice came, breathless, the sound of wind behind it. Your mother. She just collapsed in the backyard. We've called an ambulance. She's very weak. They're taking her to regional hospital. Hurry, dear, please. For an instant, the apartment fell utterly silent. The sketch on the table trembled. The paper fluttered like a trapped bird. Charlotte grabbed her coat, phone, and keys. The wind outside no longer sounded gentle. It was a pulse, urgent and alive. As she pulled the door shut, the desk lamp flickered once, spilling a streak of gold across the drawing, like light holding on at the edge of a story about to change. The revolving doors of regional hospital blew a stream of cold air and disinfectant against Charlotte's face. Rubber soles squeaked on the floor. The intercom called out emergency codes. A vending machine hummed, each sound pulsing in time with the rhythm of an evening in the ER. She nearly ran down the corridor, fingers gripping her phone so tight they went numb. At the reception desk, a nurse looked up. Patient's name? Helena Almeida, my mother. The neighbor called 911. She fainted in the backyard. Please wait in the consult area. The doctor will come out shortly. Charlotte nodded, but her legs refused to move far. She stood in the middle of that blindingly white intersection, beneath fluorescent lights that left no place for emotion to hide. Her heart thudded against her sternum, steady but fast, like a small hammer testing the foundation. The glass door inside opened. A figure in a white coat stepped out, his name tag flashing under the light. Charlotte looked up, and the world tilted half a degree. Tommy, 7 years folded into a single blink. His dark hair showed a few silver threads at the temples. His expression was calmer, more grounded. The eyes, though, that same deep, still water that could keep secrets. She could hear her own heartbeat change pitch. Charlotte, he said, his voice low but gentle, then quickly slipped back into professional cadence. Your mother's okay. She had a hypoglycemic episode, took her medication at the wrong time. We've given intravenous fluids, stabilized her blood sugar, and monitored her vitals. She's awake now, stable. I'm really glad to see you again. The last two sentences hit her like two different lights, one clinical white, one faintly warm, impossible to name. Charlotte swallowed hard. Thank you, she murmured, gripping the strap of her bag to keep her hands steady. Can I see her? Of course. I'll take you. He held the door open slightly, the scent of soap and clean cotton from his coat brushing past her, carrying memories of night shifts, metal corridors, and doors that opened with a shoulder push. They walked down the hallway. The fluorescent lights overhead spilled hard squares of white on the floor. Somewhere distant, a monitor beeped. Beeped, like a slow clock. Neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was a narrow bridge they were both crossing carefully. Inside the recovery room, Helena lay propped on a pillow, her lips pale but her eyes bright when she saw her daughter. You're here, she whispered. I'm here, Charlotte said, taking her hand. Her mother's skin cooled, then slowly warmed under her palm, as if the stone in her own chest had been replaced by something lighter. Tommy stood at the foot of the bed, his tone steady yet kind. She'll stay overnight for observation. Tomorrow we'll adjust her dosage and review usage timing. If all vitals remain stable, she can go home. Thank you, doctor, Helena said. The word doctor weighted with trust. She glanced at her daughter, eyes glimmering with humor even through the weakness. He's a good one. Charlotte smiled, smoothing the blanket. Rest, Mom. I'll stay here. I'll step out to finish the admission paperwork, Tommy said, his gaze meeting hers for a second. One heartbeat longer than a second should last, enough for a faint electric current to pass through. Then he left, the door closing softly behind him, leaving only breath sounds, fabric rustles, and a nurse's pen scratching at the desk. A while later, Helena drifted into sleep, her breathing even. Charlotte stepped into the hall. Tommy waited near the corner, a file tucked under his arm, the pen in his hand tapping lightly on the folder, stopping when he saw her. I'm sorry, he said simply, directly. For a lot of things, 7 years worth. In hospitals, people didn't waste oxygen. Charlotte drew in a long breath, letting the cold air roll through her lungs. We'll talk later, she said. Not evasive, but not open either. Tonight's about my mom. I understand. He nodded, a small curve touching his lips. If you need anything, call me. My number's still the same. She gave a faint smile. Mine too. A heartbeat skipped, offbeat, not painful, just a reminder she was still living her own story. Tommy nodded goodbye. His white coat slipped out of the light, silent as a page in a file being closed for now. Charlotte stood beneath the fluorescent glow, tasting the metallic tang of disinfectant in the air. A nurse pushed a cart past. The wheels gave a soft squeak. She turned back into the room, pulled a chair beside the bed, and watched her mother sleep. The lines around Helena's eyes and mouth looked like a map of an old home captured in a photograph. Helena stirred, half awake, whispering, Honey. Yes, Mom, I'm here. Her mother smiled faintly, voice thin but teasing. That kind doctor, the way he looks at you, it's different. She closed her eyes again, drifting off as if she'd just placed the final missing piece in a puzzle. Charlotte sat still, listening to the distant beeps, her own heartbeat answering in rhythm. Outside, the corridor remained starkly white, everything exposed. At the edge of that light, an old name had returned, not with a loud noise, but in the quiet way someone says, Your mother's all right, and then adds just a half beat too softly, I'm really glad to see you again. She held her mother's hand a little tighter, letting that line hang above them like a light left on, waiting for the long night to pass, waiting for a morning calm enough to switch it fully on. The doctor's break room was small, like a cabin wedged between two shifts. Soft light, the faint scent of mint tea lingered in the air. Tommy closed the door, set a bottle of water on the table, and stepped half a pace back, as if leaving space for all the unsaid things to enter and leave freely. Thank you, for my mom, Charlotte began, her voice low, and for stepping out to see me instead of hiding behind your profession. Tommy leaned lightly against the cabinet, eyes steady. I owe you an apology that's 7 years late, he said, a breath. I thought I could live apart from my family name by keeping quiet. But silence, in the end, was its own kind of mistake. Charlotte nodded, turning the bottle cap slowly. That night, I heard from someone else who you were. I filled in the rest myself. I never gave you a chance to speak. She looked up. I was afraid you were lying. You were afraid I'd leave once I knew the truth. Those fears, like two doors shutting at once. Tommy pulled a chair closer and sat across from her, close enough for their breaths to be audible. That night, he said quietly, I felt like I was running 2 shifts, one for the hospital, one for my past. I failed both. They both gave a small, tired laugh, the kind that accepts truth when there's nowhere else to go. The air vent hummed. The curtain swayed faintly. I got married, Charlotte said plainly, and divorced. He was kind, decent, and stable. But stability isn't home. I thought I'd learned to live without crescendos. Turns out I still miss the melody. I moved away, Tommy said. Worked hard, slept lightly, tried to start over once, but every time I said the word future, there was still an open door behind it. Silence stretched between them like a gentle cat, quiet but present. Charlotte set the bottle down, her fingertips brushed the back of his hand. She almost pulled away, but didn't. Neither did he. The touch was small, but enough to change the rhythm of a heartbeat by a quarter beat. I don't want to skip steps, Charlotte said. I don't want to name something that hasn't earned its distance yet. Tommy nodded. I'm done rushing. If you're willing, we start again, as friends. We get coffee, talk, and sometimes stay silent. No big promises, just no disappearing. The word friends sat quietly between them like an empty cup, waiting to be filled. Charlotte met his eyes, the same dark water, but calmer now, depth without turbulence. Friends, she repeated, the word feeling both right and breathable. From the hallway came the soft squeak of a hospital bed rolling by, a faint underline to the sentence they'd just spoken. Tommy tilted his head slightly, his voice lowering. I'll text you my free days, not to bind anything, just so you know when we could walk around the block, talk about the weather. I won't write the script alone anymore, Charlotte said. If I don't understand, I'll ask. If I'm scared, I'll say it. They let go of each other almost at the same moment, not from hesitation, but like setting something fragile on a flat surface. Tommy stood and opened the door. The white corridor light spilled in, dividing the room into warmth and chill. He turned back with a small smile on his face, his eyes soft. All right then. Friends. Charlotte nodded. Her heartbeat was calm, yet unmistakably present. When the door clicked shut, the sound was quiet, like the mark of a new page, untitled but already numbered. The old cafe by the window glowed with a streak of slanted gold. The barista washed cups, the sound of water running like a quiet melody. Charlotte arrived first, ordered an Americano, and opened her sketchbook. She drew a porch, no measurements, no notes, just a line to fill the silence. The bell chimed. Tommy walked in, coat unbuttoned, tie stuffed in his pocket like someone just off a long shift. When he saw her, he paused for half a second. His eyes lit up in that calm, steady way that used to steady her too. Without big words, he sat down, still catching his breath. Yesterday, I said I wouldn't make any grand promises, he began, his voice low but clear. But there's one thing I can't leave unsaid. It's been sitting between us like an invisible wall. Charlotte looked up. I've ended everything else, he said slowly, placing each word like a stone. Because I can't pretend I've forgotten you anymore. Not since yesterday, not since last week, for a long time. I've just been stubbornly playing the man who had. The words passed through the sunlight and landed softly in the tenderest part of her chest. Tears rose without warning. She smiled, then cried. Not loudly, just warmly. I never forgot either, she whispered. I folded our memories away in a drawer, but every time I reached for a shirt, one would slip out. Tommy reached for her hand, paused, asking permission with his eyes, then placed his over hers. His hand was warm, carrying the faint scent of hospital soap and coffee. He didn't squeeze, just held enough to steady her trembling fingers. I don't have a speech, he said quietly. I just want to sit here. Look at you. Let silence do some of the talking. Outside, the wind brushed the curtain. Leaves cast soft shadows on the table. On her cooling coffee, a thin golden sheen shimmered. Charlotte tilted the cup, hiding her smile behind the rim. If love had a shape, she said, I think it would look more like sunlight on the table than fireworks. It warmed slowly. And it needs someone willing to stay still, Tommy finished, his gaze never leaving her. They traded small stories, his about ICU hallways at 4 a.m., where the machines ticked like the universe's clock. Hers about the wood shop where she learned to tell oak from walnut by scent. Their words weren't trying to prove anything, just small dishes set out on a long table. A coffee cart rolled by. The barista placed a kettle on the stove, the water bubbling softly. Charlotte turned her palm upward, weaving her fingers through his. The gesture was simple, and both their hearts skipped a beat. Let's try to write a new chapter, she said. No title yet. Just two people leaving this cafe, turning left or right. No destination, just walking together. I'll walk with you, Tommy said without hesitation. If there's a call, I'll say 5 minutes. If I have to step away, I'll see you to the door. He smiled. Not a promise, just courtesy for the person I want to stay with. The light deepened, crawling over their knuckles. Far away, church bells marked the hour. Charlotte wiped her tears and laughed. I think this coffee's gone cold. Then let's order another, Tommy said. And maybe a cake. One we can share without knives, so neither of us has to stand up. When the barista brought two steaming cups to their table, they didn't let go right away. Outside, the traffic lights changed. Inside, the steam rose in soft spirals. They sat quietly, no vows, no declarations, just letting a love story begin again, with the simplest act of staying. 2 years later, the afternoon light poured gold over the small garden on the edge of the suburbs, where Charlotte and Tommy were getting married. No lavish guests, no extravagance, just close friends, a few old colleagues, and the people who had witnessed them find their way back to each other. The two-story house behind them was Charlotte's own design. She had drawn it the year before, a home flooded with natural light through wide windows, wooden floors that held warmth, and a jasmine-covered porch. Not a mansion, but every corner carried a story, a small window seat where she once dreamed of peace, a solid oak bench that Tommy had built himself, one careful piece at a time. Her mother, Helena, sat in a wicker chair, holding a small bouquet of dried jasmine. "You finally built it," she said softly when Charlotte bent to kiss her hand. "Not just a house, but a place where your heart can stay." As soft music began to play, Charlotte stepped under the wooden eaves where Tommy was waiting. White shirt, gray tie, that quiet smile, bright and steady like the last sunlight of the day. She reached for his hand. "You once said," she began, "life didn't give me you when I wanted, but when I needed." She smiled. "And I finally built a home, not with bricks, but with you." Tommy laughed softly and kissed her forehead. Around them, the applause rose, gentle as the wind. In the small crowd, Richard stood beside his new wife, a woman with brown hair and kind eyes, her fingers intertwined with his. When Charlotte's gaze found them, she hesitated for half a second, then smiled, genuinely. Richard approached as the ceremony paused for the cake cutting. "Congratulations, Charlotte," he said, his voice calm, sincere. "This house, it's so you." "Thank you," she replied, lightness in her tone, like closing a long hallway of doors. Richard's wife smiled warmly. "He's told me about your work. Now I see why." Charlotte nodded. "I wish you both happiness." Tommy joined her, shaking Richard's hand. Brief, firm, the kind of handshake between men who understand. The past is gone, respect remains. The sunset stretched across the porch, softening every face into peace. Two neighbor kids ran past, laughing, tugging a small kite behind them. Helena lifted her eyes to the sky, where light met memory, her gaze shimmering as if it touched the husband she once loved. Tommy's hand tightened gently around Charlotte's. "Life didn't give me you when I wanted," he whispered again, "but when I needed." Charlotte tilted her head, her smile carrying the weight and warmth of their shared years. "And I finally built a home," she said, "not with bricks, but with you." A breeze stirred the thin curtains in the window frame. Inside, two porcelain mugs sat side by side on the kitchen shelf, etched with the words home and heart. Laughter, wind, and the scent of coffee blended into one, the final, perfect draft of a love once unfinished. Above the garden, the little kite rose higher, dipping through the last rays of sunlight, like the spirit of the past smiling, making room for a beginning both gentle and whole.